Additional warnings: viewer discretion is advised. Pictures will be shown throughout the video that people may find triggering and just downright disturbing. I remember when hearing about this horrible, disgusting true crime, I was in my early teens. I remember watching this with my mother, and she was describing in vivid detail what he had been accused of. The murdering, the mutilation, having intercourse with the mutilated corpse, then cooking and eating certain parts of their bodies. I couldn't imagine people would do something so heinous. We didn't have computers/phones in our pockets, so you couldn't just Google the pictures and see actual photos of what this sicko had done. I believe I had seen it in a popular tabloid magazine. They had published the pictures. I also remember seeing it in a lot of the serial killer books that I would later have in my life, where the awful pictures are. So over time, in my early 20s, I admit, I became just fascinated by all serial killers. I watched this movie years ago called Dahmer. It wasn't bad. So let me cut to last week. I'm on TikTok. It makes me laugh. I actually tell people to watch TikTok videos. It's really good for depression. But I started seeing all these Dahmer skits. I'm not understanding why. Oh, there's a movie on Netflix. No, I don't want to see it. And no, I don't know who's playing Jeffrey Dahmer. But I ended up watching it, upset with myself because I don't normally go with the norm. And everyone was talking about this. And yes, it's a very good movie. And yes, Dahmer, the character that played Dahmer, he was dead on. Excellent. So by now you know that Jeffrey Dahmer has killed 17 boys and men over a 13-year period. It started off by his obsession with dissecting the roadkill that he found in the streets. And the first person he murdered was a Caucasian man. Most of the men that he murdered was Black and or African American. It stood out that he murdered a 14-year-old Asian boy. That boy was returned back to him naked, bleeding, and drugged by Dahmer. And the police just gave this child back to Dahmer, where he would finish off his murderous intents on that young boy. He mutilated them, experimented with their bodies while they were still alive. Torture. And he lured them to the home after promising them cash for taking pictures of them. Just innocent pictures. And offering them alcoholic beverages to let their guards down, to keep them at ease. And of course, these beverages were pre-made before he went out to frequent these gay bars and bathhouses. Most of these men were homosexual, but Dahmer said he didn't even care if they were homosexual as long as they were beautiful. Dahmer admittedly was battling with his own sexuality then. He says he even kept these body parts in the refrigerator that he would later cook and eat, like their hearts. He says he felt that he kept them close to him, like they didn't leave him. There were complaints, many complaints from the community, but most of them were Black, non-white people. So their complaints fell on deaf ears. The police just didn't care. The people that lived in the buildings or the surrounding buildings next to Dahmer's, they knew that something was just not right with this man, but no one could put their finger on what was going on in that apartment. How could they? This was 28 years ago. So when these stories were back in the press again, I didn't understand why. I already knew about it. He was dead, good riddance, and continue healing to those that were affected by his crimes. So why are they talking about this? Now, I watched TikTok again, and it's great for depression, and trust and believe, I was going through something and somewhat still am. I watch TikTok videos a lot, and again, it really is great for depression. I sometimes feel guilty for laughing at the clips on TikTok when it comes to Dahmer. I do know that a lot of the tragedy and pain still stems from what Dahmer has done today. YouTube, tons of videos along with the ID channel and Netflix about Dahmer. So I will only speak about two people. And these people were the ones that entered into Dahmer's life. The one that got away and the one that didn't let him get away with it. In order to make something seem much better, you have to make something seem much worse. And in prison, it's no difference. A man who kills and rapes 25 women, he will get more respect in prison than a man that sodomized a 3-year-old. Don't ask me why. That's just the way it goes. While Dahmer was sentenced to a 16-term of life sentences, some say 15, some say 17, but put it this way, his ass wasn't getting out alive. He was stationed at the Columbia Correctional Institute in Portage, Wisconsin. I don't know if I should use the word stationed, but his ass was there. It was there when Dahmer, 34 years old at this time, would cross paths with Christopher Scarver. He was 25 years old then. Let me tell you why Scarver even was sent to prison. Christopher Scarver was one in 5 children born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He dropped out of high school in the 11th grade and he became an alcoholic, and his mother would ultimately kick him out of their house. At a Job Corps program in Wisconsin, he became a trainee carpenter. His supervisor, Edward Patz, promised him after completing the program he would be hired on as a full-time carpenter. But the supervisor, Patz, was dismissed, so the opportunity that Patz had given him was no longer available because Patz was no longer working there either. Scarver's drinking increased, and he said he began to hear voices calling him the, quote, chosen one, unquote. These voices may have been God, that's what he was saying. On June 1st, 1990, Scarver went into that Job Corps office and found the on-site manager. It was not Edward Patz. It was John Fayen and an employee, Steve Lohman. He forced Fayen by gunpoint demanding money. Fayen gave him $15, which was all he had. This enraged Scarver. He shot Fayen 3 times in the head. Now he demanded money from Lohman, which witnessed him killing Fayen. Lohman wrote him a check for $3,000, gave him credit cards, and was able to escape while dodging bullets, shots fired by him by Scarver. Of course, Fayen was dead. Scarver was found with the gun, the checks, the credit cards, and Scarver would end up receiving life in prison for his crimes. On the day that Dahmer was murdered, there was a man murdered by Scarver just minutes after Dahmer died. His name was Jesse Anderson. He was serving a life imprisonment and the possibility of parole after 60 years. So another one who wasn't going to see the light of day outside of barbed wire. Anderson had taken his wife out to dinner at TGIF. He would tell police that 2 black men had approached him. I suppose they were going to rob him. They had stabbed his wife to death and stabbed him as well, trying to kill him. One of the black men had left an LA Clippers hat behind. The hat was later traced to Anderson, who had purchased it just for this crime. Evidence left behind. Based on Scarver, he figured that he was a racist. He also defaced a portrait of Martin Luther King that another inmate had painted and hung up to dry in an art room in the prison. And Anderson had put a red dot on King's forehead, like a bullet wound. Scarver felt he disrespected the Martin Luther King portrait. He would cave Scarver's head in with that metal 50-inch rod from the gin room, still bloody, after killing Dahmer. Now, all three men, Dahmer, Anderson, and Scarver, were left to do cleaning in the gym room and the bathrooms. Some say that this was a setup by the guards. Dahmer had become popular. He was getting letters. Comic books was made out of him in the free world. People were sending him money and gifts, writing him consistently. He was getting visits. He would even pretend to put ketchup and use it as blood and shaping his food in body parts and just taunting the other inmates. This wasn't a scare tactic because nobody in there was afraid of Dahmer. This was just annoying them with his antics, since they knew when he was a free man what he had been capable of. This was actually the second attempt on Dahmer's life. He'd only been there for 2 years by then, and already 2 different people had tried to kill him. There were many people who were trying to kill him. So it basically was who was going to get him first type deal in the prison. Jeffrey Dahmer had claimed he found God in prison, and he had started to study his Bible. He was reborn, and 6 months later, he was murdered. So, he's forgiven, right? Now, Scarver was later diagnosed with schizophrenia and had been suffering from Masonic delusions. He had been bounced from prison to prison, not wanting the public to know exactly where they had imprisoned him, meaning the prison didn't want the public to know. I mean, he had became a celebrity prison inmate, if you will. I mean, he killed Jeffrey Dahmer. In 2004, Scarver brought a federal civil rights suit against officials of Wisconsin Secure Program Facility. He argued he was subjected to cruel and unusual punishment. He had spent 16 years in solitary confinement as a result for killing Dahmer. They hadn't mentioned if Anderson's justice was added in that punishment. Christopher Scarver had tried to appeal that suit in 2006. The judge dismissed it. I've seen interviews of Christopher Scarver's son right here on YouTube. Scarver had found out he was a father right after being incarcerated. Despite Scarver dropping out of high school, they say he is extremely smart, highly intelligent. He's written books and wanted to start a program where children that have parents that are incarcerated are more than likely to follow the same path as their parents. He wants to make sure that these children stay on the straight and narrow and have those resources. He wants these children who have parents who are inmates prosper. Dahmer's father, Lionel Dahmer, and his second wife, Sherry, they're still alive and living in Seville, Ohio. He hasn't yet said anything about the #1 show that is streaming on Netflix starring his son. But he doesn't need to. He may not want to relive this. He's 86 years old now. Jeffrey Dahmer's mother, Joyce, had died of breast cancer in 2000. She had worked at Fresno and founded The Living Room. It was an HIV community center where she would help the young people or anyone that had HIV. Jeffrey's younger brother, David Dahmer, he changed his name years ago. I don't know if he changed the first one, but he definitely changed the last one. And of course we know there's no need to ask why.